Welcome to the Lost Boys to Found Fathers podcast. I'm Gabriel O'Sullivan, and joining me is my co-host, Will Cox. We are men who have suffered the loss of a child, and through this production, we desire to offer encouragement, strength, and hope to our fellow brothers who have traveled the same journey. So welcome, Will. We are going to continue our multi-part series here called Intentional Fatherhood. So this is episode 5 in Intentional Fatherhood, and I'm going to throw it over to Will to let him introduce us a little bit further.
Yeah, so like you said, this episode 5, we've kind of, just to recap quickly, we are discussing, like you said, intentional fatherhood. We are giving a little bit of an overview of a why we're doing each of these things, and then we're providing some practical tips. So we've already discussed just in general biblical perspective on fatherhood and some examples from the Bible. We talked about prioritizing family time and quality time, and not just time, but time that matters and we're doing something together. Talked about how as fathers and husbands we need to lead by example, and then our latest episode we discussed the importance of traditions and how to create traditions, how to explain the importance of traditions to our family, and again, as we said, in an age-appropriate way. But we're going forward now, we want to talk about the importance of effective communication, and this could be, you could probably put that on just about any podcast, whether it's talking about family leadership, talking about work, talking about growing a podcast, whatever you want to talk about. Communication is important, and I work in project management, so I'm in construction, and communication can get a building built on time, or communication, I've heard stories of this, can have a building like a foot off in either direction, or maybe it's a foot off in two directions, and the whole foundation is twisted or crooked. That means your steel now has to be twisted or refabricated. Everything is screwed up. Walls are crooked, everything. So communication is key. You probably have heard that other places before. But specifically what we're going to talk about today is the importance of fostering open and honest communication between fathers and children. And before I jump into that, do you have anything else to add there, Gabe?
Well, I'd just say I like the idea of this topic and where it's going, because, we hear, like, back in the day, right, that, like, children were just supposed to be, like, there and, like, not say a word and, like, not have any place necessarily in the home, from some of those old whatever TV shows or, movies that you might watch, from back in the day. And, we don't think that's appropriate, right? Because God's given those little children a voice, and we need to help them foster the opportunity to have a voice, right? And to speak that voice, and in an appropriate and respectful manner. And so us teaching them how to communicate by communicating appropriately and effectively with them is only going to benefit them in the schoolyard, and also later in life as they're going to be little leaders that grow up to be big leaders. And so this is crucial, for being an intentional father. And I'll just throw in one little thing that I do. Again, it kind of in the summer, I guess, for some reasons, when this ends up happening with us. And there's a part near our house that has a amphitheater. And what we'll do is I'll inevitably take our kids down there at some point this summer before school is out, and I'll have them stand in the down on the stage part of the amphitheater, and I'll tell them, I'm like, all right, you have to tell me your name, and I need you to talk about this subject for 5 minutes or something to that effect. And man, they, the little ones, they're just so embarrassed and whatever. And older daughter, she doesn't have so much of a problem with it. But I've been doing with that with her since she was young, as well, just in an effort to teach them how to be comfortable on stage and how to speak publicly. And again, I'm not trying to take credit or kudos for anything, because we still got a long way to go in that. But that's just one little thing that I've been doing for years with our kids. And even now, like we've kind of started to see the necessity to take that a step further and be more intentional about that, even like weekly. And so the other day, my wife, we had talked about this, and so she remembered for us to do it. And so we just made our middle son sit on the couch with me and like look me in the eye, and like we just had a conversation for 5 minutes, which for him is like an eternity, because his mind is like all over the place, man. Like he's got to be doing this and then that and then talking about this and that and then doing this game and that game, and like he bounces around a lot. And so for him to actually sit and look at you in the eye and like have a conversation is really challenging for him. But we're training him in how to do that, because he needs to know how to do that, you know, with his teachers or with his classmates or with his coaches. And then one day, you know, in business or ministry or whatever, you know, the Lord calls him to do. So that's a couple things I'll just throw out there.
No, absolutely. And that's all where we're heading here too, like you say. If we are not, I guess the first thing is just talk about the difference in like listening to your kids and hearing your kids. And you can say that, again, you can apply it. You're teaching them these same skills. So to what you just said, you know, are they listening to their teacher at school and it's like the idea of in one ear, out the other? Or are they hearing the teacher? They're hearing the lesson, so they're learning and they're digesting it. They're able to put it into their head, build upon earlier information, you know, and from mathematical concepts, you know, you're just hearing someone, you're listening to someone just throw out, okay, so this is how you do addition, blah, blah, blah. Okay, now here's here's multiplication, here's division. Okay, now they get to calculus. If they just been listening for years and not understanding, not digesting, building concept upon concept, they're going to get to pre-calculus or calculus and they're going to be like, what? I don't even barely know what x plus y equals 3 means. Like, how am I supposed to figure out calculus here, and how am I supposed to build upon things? And so, like you said, if they get to late high school, they go to college, they're in the workforce, they're trying to get to know someone of the opposite sex and build a relationship and have a family, and they don't know how to communicate, that's going to be really tough.
Yeah.
And I guess that is the reality for a lot of people these days, and that's unfortunate. But as far as we can help it as fathers with our own kids, it's important to, like you said, to practice these conversations and to have, and there's another one maybe later on, a few episodes from now. Still, we have a little ways to go on this one, and we're talking about the importance of spending time with your kids, and we talk about like limiting technology or eliminating technology. And I think this is a decent time to throw that in too. That, you know, I'm guilty of trying to talk to my daughter. Let's say we all get up on Saturdays or Sundays and we have time. We're sitting together and we're eating breakfast, and you know, I wouldn't say she watches a ton of cartoons, but we'll sit down at the table and she'll say, Daddy, can I watch a show? And you know, if you're feeling worn out or you don't feel like talking or whatever, I just want to look at my phone for a minute, I can turn on her show, she can watch it, she can eat, and then I try to talk to her like, Bonnie, eat your blueberries or eat your peanut butter or whatever it is. And you see she's staring at that screen. She doesn't even hear. She might pick up a blueberry and eat it, but she's not paying attention to you. She's, like we said, she's listening. She's not hearing you. So a lot of times I'd have to like pause the show and say, all right, take another bite of your sandwich, and then I'll turn the show back on. And at that point, it's like, all right, spell's broken. I'm going to do what you asked me to do.
Yeah.
And then you turn the show back on. So we can talk more about technology later, but really what we're talking about here is whether you have a show you need to pause, whether you're at a park and things are crazy and kids are running around, and you're at a splash pad is Bonnie's favorite thing these days, is a local park that has a splash pad, and she loves that. And you're trying to get her to dial back in, listen to you, and tell her something, 5 more minutes and we're going to go, or whatever the thing is, don't go over there and jump off that and try to do a backflip like this kid. So the idea is you're building communication, and again, everything we're saying is in an age-appropriate way. You're, like you just mentioned, you're practicing that with your kids, and you're not, I have a propensity to like, okay, so I'm a relatively logical person. I'm just going to assume my kids are relatively logical people, and I'll just sit down and I'll explain to Bonnie, this is what you need to do, this is why you need to do it. And she's 3.5, and say, do you understand? She says, yes, Daddy. And then she goes and does the opposite. Like, I can yell at her, like, what is your problem? We just had this conversation. Why aren't you doing what I asked you to do? Or I can say, okay, she's 3.5. Clearly she didn't understand. it's my fault as the more rational adult to have a conversation with her to clear up a miscommunication, make sure she understands what's expected of her. And then, if we've gone over this multiple times and it's just, you don't put your foot over there, at that point, once we have made it very clear, demonstrated to her what she's not supposed to do, and if she does it, there could be punishment. But I think the idea, you're starting with an idea of a 3-year-old, and don't do this, don't do that, up to a 7, 12, 15-year-old child. If you are having conversations with them that are basically, don't do that, that's bad for you, come over here, do this, clean your room, whatever it is, get in the shower, get out, go to bed. You're not building any sort of relationship. You're not establishing effective communication. You're just bossing them around. And to your point, what you said towards the beginning, when I think of like parents that don't communicate or don't have any intention of communicating, I think of like that concept, I guess from the 1800s, 1900s, of like sending your kids to a boarding school. Like, kids are to be seen and not heard, that whole idea. And I'm going to send my kid to a boarding school because I had kids and I want them when they're like 15 or 16 and I can talk to them like adults. So I'm just going to send them to a boarding school until then, and they'll come back for a few months of the year, whatever, I'll deal with them. My maid will deal with them, whatever the whole idea was in the 1800s, 1900s. And then when I want them, when it's convenient for me, we'll build a relationship. And that's not how it works. And hopefully most people aren't sending their kids to boarding school these days, but we can have that same idea, that same mindset that now they're little, my daughter's just 3, you can't really build a relationship with her. I can't really communicate with her, so I'll just get through. Maybe when she's 10, we can have some conversations, and I can treat her like it's not worth my time to try to have a conversation and not build these steps towards effective communication. Like you said, sitting down and having eye-to-eye conversations and giving them that discipline, that skill. Or I can be intentional about it and help her, and by the time she's 10, she can be having conversations with anybody, and any adult, any kid, and be friendly to everyone, show everyone that they matter, and we could discuss the importance of sitting down and focusing one-on-one on somebody and how that builds your relationship with them because they feel like they are important. So I think there's a lot of things I kind of touched on there quickly, but just the biggest thing is, we only get a certain amount of time with our kids, whether that's, just for 18 years they're in our house, or if you're thinking on the smaller level, we did the math a few episodes ago as to how little time, if you're working, you actually get with your kids, like 2 to 4 hours a day, 5-6 days a week. And so just thinking about that, being intentional with that time and building a relationship with your kids means communicating with them effectively, and that really just means whatever you need to do to have conversations with them, to show that you love them, to show that I can set my phone down for 10 minutes and have a conversation with my kid, and I'm not sitting here, which I'm guilty of this sometimes too, trying to get my child to do something while I'm either playing a game on my phone or scrolling through Twitter looking at the latest NBA news or something, or I'm trying to listen to a podcast while she's watching a show, while we're eating, while my wife's trying to tell me something, and I'm modeling very bad communication skills to my kids. And so being intentional, take that step back and showing them what it means to focus in on someone and value them and their time is something that we can miss very easily.
Yeah, and I think that it is a scientific fact that our brains cannot focus on 2 things at one time. Like you ask somebody, can you multitask? Yeah, I can multitask. That person is not telling the truth. They think they can multitask. What they're saying is, I can do this one thing for a little bit, then I can switch over here and do this other thing for a little bit, then I can switch over here and do this other thing for a little bit. But the reality of it is, you're only doing one thing at one time. Meaning that if we have our phone, and I'm guilty of this too, if we have our phone and we're trying to send a text message to somebody while we're trying to have a conversation with our kid, our spouse, or whomever, we cannot talk to somebody and send a text message at the same time. We're only focusing on that one thing, meaning that if we're talking to somebody and looking at them in the eye, then we can't be sending that text message. We might be kind of hearing what they're saying, but we're not having real good communication with them. What we're saying is, hold on, it's like putting somebody on Like back in the day, we had call waiting. Okay, we still have that on our phones. You're talking to somebody, a phone call comes in, you're like, hey, hold on.
People don't even know what it is now because it's just so common.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
So, you're like, hold on, let me not talk to you for a minute because I'm going to talk to this other person for a minute. That's what we're doing when we're splitting our time between a screen or between a phone, a text message, or anything else for that matter, or some computer work. And so what are we doing? What are we modeling to our kids? Are we modeling that, hey, yeah, it's okay to have my attention on all these other things instead of you? Or are we saying, just like you said before, like you are valued as a person to me, and so I'm only going to give my attention to you when I'm giving my attention to you, right? And so meaning that we can't be mad at our kids later if they get phones and now we're trying to talk with them and they grab it because their buddies have texted them and they're like communicating with their buddies over a text message instead of talking to me and you, because we've done that to them, right? So we've shown them like, oh, this is okay to do that. And if that's what we're doing, then like don't get mad at them for modeling your behavior, right? Like understand you've shown them that. So how do we get out of that? Well, we don't do that. That's how we get out of that. Like when we're talking to our kids and our phone beeps or buzzes or whatever, we don't go to it. We just let it be. Dude, I'm a chiropractor, right? I'll have communications with my patients. I'll be in the room with them and we're having a discussion about their health, and then their phone goes off or their watch buzzes or whatever, and like I can see it. Well, I'm looking them in the eyes, and where does their phone? Their eyes go right to that watch, or it goes right over to that phone, and then there's like that disconnect where you can see, like, okay, they just thought about who that person was and what that text message might be about, and now they're out of the communication with me, and they kind of forget briefly what we were talking about, and it takes them 3 or 4 seconds to get back into that, to get their brain right to be able to talk to me again. Now that's the same way that we are, with our kids, and so that is not something that we want to model. I'll just one more thing about text messages and whatnot. So I think the text thing is great. It's a very effective communication tool, because quite honestly, we can oftentimes skip what I call the pleasantries and just get down to business, which may not be the best way to establish relationships. But it can be very effective when you're just trying to get an answer or get something done. However, I think that has negatively affected all of our communication at times. In that, like my wife and I we got to have a lunch with our daughter yesterday, who's 17, and our boys were off with my mom at a little science center here locally. They were hanging out with her for the afternoon, and so we were just having lunch with her, and we were talking about how sometimes she can have the propensity to just like, if she calls us, like there's no hello, there's no hey, it's just like, hey, I need this, and this, or I need you to do this, or hey, can I do this. And so it's just an immediate, like a phone conversation, almost like a text conversation, right? And so we were talking about how, hey, we need to, even though it might kill a little bit of time, right, and kind of, it might take you 15 seconds to get past it. It is important to like actually have a conversation with somebody instead of just like lay out your list of demands for somebody. And so we had a 15-minute talk about the pros and cons of communication as it were a text message or not as a text message, And so I was like, we live in the South. It's kind of hard to get to the point sometimes because, we're going to call them up. Hey, how you doing?
How's your family in there?
Yeah, how's your family? I'm good, So we were joking. Avery was like, she was like, well, what if you just like call somebody and be like, hey, I'm good. How are you? That way you answer the question they're about to ask you first, and then all you have to wait for is their response, and then you can get right into the what you want to ask them. And I was like, that's a pretty good idea.
That's
right
smart.
There.
Not how it's done.
That's right.
Everyone's gonna be like, wow, they're really a jerk.
Oh no, I was like, that's pretty good. So yeah, I think she's probably gonna be a CEO someday of something. That's for sure.
No, I mean, I'm just thinking a couple things popped in my head there, but like just to drive home the point of, we can say, what's the harm in having a conversation with your kids, or worse, having a conversation with your spouse, and somebody texts you and we're aware, like, if somebody calls you, if your parents call you, and whatever reason, like, your parents are older, you don't know what's going on, your parents call you at 11:30 at night, you're like, okay, honey, I need to take this. So obviously there's, like, if somebody calls you, maybe there's a little bit more urgency there. And so say you're having a conversation with your wife, your kids, and somebody's texting you and you're picking your phone up, and again, I'm guilty of this, you're picking your phone up, you're texting them, and then you're getting back into it. Like, to your point, I'm one of those people that thinks I multitask well, and so I'm very good at, like, shifting focus completely. Like, I can have, my wife gets on me, and I probably mentioned it on this podcast, I could be listening to a podcast, Bonnie's got a show playing, I'm playing a game on my phone, and Hannah's talking to me, and, like, I can play the game. It's almost like I can, like, divorce my senses from each other. Like, I'm using my eyes to play this game, my ears are listening to the podcast, I've completely tuned out Bonnie's show, Hannah starts talking to me, then I can, like, shift my brain, like, shift my ears, where I'm hearing her now. I'm still playing my game. There's still a show on, and so I'll do all that. But Hannah, all she sees is I'm still staring at that screen. There's noise over here. There's noise coming out of the phone. There's me playing something on the phone, and she's just thinking, he's not paying attention to me.
Yes, right.
And so think of, like, it's been a long time since either of us have been dating, but think of, like, you're going on a first date with somebody, or a third date, or you're out with somebody, whatever networking event, you're out at lunch with somebody, and this the first few times you talk to them, or maybe you know them a little bit, you and I are hanging out, I ask you out to lunch, and we're talking, and you pull your phone out and you text somebody, and I'm like, okay, I mean, I know how the world is. He pulls his phone out, he texts somebody, probably important. We talk for another 30 seconds, your phone beeps again, you pull it out, and then you keep doing that, and we're talking, and you're like, all right, hold on, man. Okay, sorry, go ahead. And you just do that over and over and over again, or you're staring at your phone, and I'm talking to you, and like, so how was your week? Oh yeah, it was good. If you do that over and over again, what is the other person thinking? Like, if you're on this date with this person, you're like, wow, she's a jerk. She wasn't interested in me. She just wanted to sit down, eat the food, and text whoever she was texting. Like, this other person that's a potential business partner, why would I want to do business with them if they can't sit down and focus on me for 30 minutes? They got to do whatever's on their phone that's more important than spending time with me. I would get pretty frustrated with, how is this person showing any interest in me? Why would they even agree to come to lunch with me and then sit here and text the whole time? So if you're doing that to your kids, you can say, like, oh, it's my kid, it's my son, it's my daughter. They understand. I had to text grandma, or I had to text somebody. Yeah. But you're giving them the same message that you are less important to me than whatever's on this phone. And so I know we kind of went off on the tangent of cell phones, but that's a huge thing, because we pretty much always have them in our pocket. They're, like you mentioned, I have my smartwatch on now, and it hasn't dinged yet. It's only 8:15, but when it vibrates, that's like, I mean, I guess that's the point. That's why they make it do that. But when it vibrates, you're like, oh, something's moving. Well, I got to figure out what it is. Like, it's like a bug landing on you. You got to figure out, where's that bug? What do I got to do with it? And so I don't even know the best way around that. Put your phone on silent when you're at home. I don't know the practical steps towards that, and we don't have time to discuss that in this podcast. If you're on video, we have nice sun glare where I can't even tell how long we've been going, so we'll just keep this podcast going forever. But
23 minutes,
so we need to wrap up shortly. But basically, that's all I'm trying to get at, is whether we're talking about phones or face-to-face communication, the importance of communication with kids is, if you are building a relationship, you're having real communication with them, which comes back to you're the adult, you establish effective communication, then you're building a relationship and a track record of having these conversations, so that later on, when they're 5, the important conversations may be, I lost my passy today, or I lost my special animal today, and I'm really sad about it. And that's important, to value your kids' emotions. But when they're 15, when they're 17, 18, these conversations turn into, there's this boy broke my heart, or, heaven forbid, one of my friends just died, or their parents just died, and I don't know what to do about this, or one of my friends is pregnant, I'm pregnant, whatever it is. There's these really serious conversations. There's the conversation you need to have with your kids at some point about sex and the birds and the bees talk. if that's the only time you talk to your kids is when they screwed something up, they come to you and they say, Dad, I'm pregnant. They have these conversations with you. You know, one of my best friends got in trouble for cussing out a teacher and punching the teacher in class. Like, one of these, when there's a bad situation that comes up, you don't want that to be the only time you're trying to communicate, because then you're probably going to get mad. The kids are scared. Everything's awkward. It's a hard conversation, and when something comes up, they don't want to come to you because it's a bad conversation. There's a lot of tension to it. So if you're building these habits early of having good communication and of being a source of wisdom, and even if you're not a source of wisdom, you're a patient communicator, I think you're paving the way that when they're 12 and they have a problem going through puberty, when they're 15 and their friends have an issue, when they're 19 and they failed a class in college, when they're 43 and they've got this issue or that issue and they want to come back, they know you are someone that is going to stop everything else, like we said, put the phone away and focus on them and really dial into what's going on in their lives.
I love that, and I think that it can start when they're young, right? Of like checking in on them, even, you know. So, meaning that if we ask those questions, like, "Hey, are you good today? How'd things go at school with your friends today?" Right? Not just how'd things go at school. Period. Question mark. Whatever the grammatical thing would be for that. Because then they can just be like, "Fine." Right? Hey, how did your friends treat you today? How did you treat your friends today? Was there any challenges that you faced on the playground today? Or how about the lunchroom? Were your friends nice to you at lunchroom? Were you nice to your friends at the lunchroom today? Like, asking kind of those probing questions from an early age, you know, sets the tone with your kids that, hey, we are going to have these conversations about your life and about your emotions that we can continue, you know, as you get older, right? So that way, they feel like they can trust us because they can trust us, right? And that way, when we really need to have those deeper conversations, like you said, when they're older, you know, preteen, teenage years, that those deeper conversations, like, it's not super duper awkward because we've been open, we've established that open communication from the time that they were little, you know, until now. And so that way we can be in their lives and they can be in our lives, you know, to an extent. And I think that's super important. And where do we see that modeled? You know, we see that modeled in the Bible where, you know, God is not, he's not like held back everything from us. Like, I mean, he communicates with us through his word and through his Bible. And then we even see like it modeled in the Bible where, like, if we read through the Psalms, where you've got David and other psalmists communicating openly with God, like asking God questions, pouring out their concerns, their frustrations, their anxieties, or their exaltations, their praise, their happiness, their joy. Like, we see this two-way communication, even of God telling us some stuff and us having the opportunity to talk to God about some things. And so, and it's open. Again, it's not closed. There's nothing off limits, you know, even to that point where it's like, I mean, man, goodness gracious, I remember my mama a couple times, you know, just asking me point blank about some stuff and my relationships with girls. I'm like, man, that's a really awkward conversation here, but like, she was just letting me know, like, there is nothing, you know, that I'm not gonna talk to you about or that you can't talk to me about, you know. And even though it might have been weird and awkward sometimes, like, it was good to know that, you know, that our parents have our back, right? And that's what we want our kids to know, that when maybe nobody else they feel like's got their back, that we've got their back and that we're there for them, and that obviously the Lord's there for them as well, for them to communicate with him and for them to be able to pour out their questions, concerns, frustrations, fears, anxieties, whatever, to him, because he'll listen as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think there's a ton more we could say about that, but we're probably coming up on 30 minutes, so we should wrap this one up. But I did just want to throw one thing in there, like you mentioned, you know, God modeling this to us. And the first thing that comes to mind, you know, so early on in the Bible, is we just talked about, you know, when your kids are teenagers, preteen, teenagers, you know, college age, and they can really screw up their lives with one or two bad decisions. So they do something and they're afraid, they don't want to come to us. You just mentioned, you know, your mom coming to you and asking you conversations, you know, or asking you about things that might be an awkward conversation, but she cared and she wanted to let you know, like, hey, if you do something or you're heading down a path that can get you in a lot of trouble, let's have this conversation. And think when Adam and Eve did the biggest screw up that they could do, when they disobeyed God, listened to the serpent, and ate the apple, and completely ruined, we think of, you get kicked out of school, you ruined your life. Like, imagine, no, you just brought original sin upon all of humanity. Like, that's a little bigger, like, I just ate an apple. No, you just ruined this perfection that we were able to live in the garden. And what happened? Did God sit on his throne and just be like, those stupid kids, I gave them literally everything. Like, I'm the perfect communicator. I was spending time with them walking in the garden, and they just screwed it up. So you know what? I'm just gonna wait. I'm gonna sit here. I'm good. I'm perfect. I'm gonna wait for them to come around. Like, God searched for them. That He went into the garden, and of course we know He's omniscient. But He said, where are you? He sought them out. He came to them, and He wanted to have a conversation. And then, even though they screwed up in a bigger way than any of our kids can screw up, He sacrificed animals for them and provided clothing for them and covered over their sin, not in a sweep it under the rug way, but He covered their sin with His love. Ultimately, thousands of years later, covered their sin with the life and death and resurrection of Jesus. And He sought them out, and in a way of showing love, showing that He was willing to communicate with them regardless of their circumstances. He came in love, and He gave them the grace that they needed. And so it's a quick example from the best father that I want to throw out there with you guys. But
I love it. Let's be more like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what our
Absolutely.
goal is, to be more like the Lord. That's for sure. So thank y'all for joining us today. Make sure you follow us, Lost Boys and Found Fathers, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And make sure you check out my books. That will be done. Put a question mark at the end of that. You can find that on Amazon, or Every Little Thing, 6 Small Steps to Perfect Peace. That's on Amazon, Apple Books, BarnesandNoble.com, ChristianBook.com. Thank y'all for joining us again. Let's not be lost. Let's be found in Him.